Hi, I'm Ann Kim, a senior editor at Washington Monthly, and this is the latest installment in our occasional series of short interviews with contributors to the Washington Monthly. Today's guest is Richard Kallenberg. He's the director of the American Identity Project at the Progressive Policy Institute and the nation's foremost advocate of class-based affirmative action. Hey, Rick, good to see you.
Good to be with you.
Your piece for the monthly was titled The College Board Capitulates to Trump. But before we dive into the specifics of your piece, let's set the predicate a little bit. The College Board is the nonprofit organization that administers both the SAT, the Advanced Placement Program, or AP. And your article talks about a specific tool that the College Board used to administer until very recently called Landscape. So what did that tool do, and why did the College Board end it?
Well, so Landscape was, in my view, a wonderful tool that allowed college admissions officers to look at a student's SAT, their grades, in light of what obstacles they faced in life. And so the Landscape focused on two variables. One is the socioeconomic status of the neighborhood that a student lives in. The other is the socioeconomic status of the high school. And so they looked at a wide variety of factors, things like the crime rate in the neighborhood, the share of those from single parent homes, the income level, and a similar set of statistics for the high school. And that way, a college admissions officer could simply type in a student's address, type in the high school name, and have a great sense of the context in which a student achieved his or her academic record. And as to why they got rid of it, that's much more mysterious. So the College Board had a very short statement on their website saying that the legal and political environments had shifted, which most people take to read that Trump is going after what Trump is calling proxy discrimination. That is, even if you're not using racial preferences, if you're trying to get some racial diversity, which most people of goodwill think is a good thing, then that's problematic, even if you're using race-neutral factors like income.
Uh-huh. So, I mean, the landscape tool never asked about race. That data is just simply was not available in the landscape tool, correct?
That's
And the
correct.
idea is that if a student is getting a great SAT score, despite despite the fact that they are living in a high crime neighborhood or a high poverty neighborhood, then there's something extraordinary about that child. I mean, that's the underlying theory, right?
Absolutely. We want to try to identify these strivers, the ones who have done really, really well despite facing a lot of hurdles in life.
Mhm. So you have been a very outspoken opponent, actually, of racial preferences and affirmative action. And in fact, you were an expert witness in the recent landmark Supreme Court case ruling that colleges can't use race in making admissions decisions. So you've alluded to this a little bit, but your piece, you said that the College Board's decision was, quote, the worst kind of capitulation to Trump. Why do you say that as an opponent of affirmative action yourself?
Well, I've always been a supporter of economic or class-based affirmative action. So it's not that I'm opposed to the idea of giving a leg up to students who've overcome obstacles. It's that I thought we were using race as a proxy for class. That most of the research evidence suggests race matters in American society, but class matters a lot more today. And universities were basically bringing together fairly wealthy students of all colors. And I thought that was inadequate, and have long argued that we should shift the basis of affirmative action from race to economic status. And Landscape was this wonderful tool that allowed universities to pursue both economic and indirectly racial diversity without using racial preferences. Racial preferences are deeply unpopular. They're now illegal. And so this was a really positive path forward that the College Board provided and now has kind of mysteriously eliminated.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what's interesting about what's happening here is that there are a number of states that have the so-called top 10% plan. Texas, for instance, where if you're in the top 10% of your high school class, then you're automatically admitted to the flagship institution or another state institution. And that seems to be kind of a landscape on a state level. So should states be concerned then that those programs may be under fire as well?
Well, it always makes sense to pay attention at some level to what the administration in Washington is saying. But ultimately, it's not up to Donald Trump to decide what's legal and what's illegal. It's up to the Supreme Court. And there is good reason to think that the US Supreme Court would never go as far as Trump is going. The Supreme Court in the Students for Fair Admissions decision said racial diversity is something the benefits of racial diversity are worthy. That this is something that universities might pursue, but not with racial preferences. And Trump is taking that, taking a leap and saying, well, if even part of your goal is racial diversity, then using race-neutral factors is illegal. And the Supreme Court has never said that. In fact, the top 10% plan is something that conservatives on the Supreme Court have cited as kind of the right way to do affirmative action because it doesn't look at the individual race of students, but does end up bringing the benefits of racial and economic integration on campus.
So just to clarify your position and make it crystal clear, you support diversity, both economic and racial. You don't support race-based affirmative action. What you believe, however, is that Trump is actually opposed to diversity, period.
Well,
and I think you actually call Trump out to some extent in your piece on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on some level, it shouldn't be all that surprising. I mean, Donald Trump has a terrible history on racial issues, and he actually had public opinion on his side when he was opposed to the use of racial preferences in college admissions. Where I think he's lost them is in saying, no matter how you achieve it, I'm going to be suspicious if you're achieving racial diversity, because most people like racial diversity. They just didn't want racial preferences as the means of getting there, but they're open to the idea of giving a break to economically disadvantaged students, a disproportionate share of whom are Black and Hispanic. Precisely because of discrimination in this country. It's no accident that Black and Hispanic populations are disproportionately low income and working class. That's a legacy of our discriminatory systems. But it's a way to get racial diversity without racial preferences. And Donald Trump, I think, has lost the public in saying he's basically opposed to racial diversity at all, any way it's achieved.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to ask this question, but what kind of America do you think Trump envisions if you spin out the policies that he's talking about? I mean, whom exactly does he think is deserving of opportunity, if not the kids who've overcome financial hardship and been successful nonetheless? Maybe that's a rhetorical question, but
yeah, it raises a troubling issue. What is the end game here for Trump and other conservatives? Increasingly, it's looking like the resegregation of higher education. And that's something that the public does not support. So the reason that George W. Bush, when he was governor of Texas, put the top 10% plan in is because he recognized racial preferences are unpopular, racial diversity is widely supported, and so let's find new ways to get racial diversity without using racial preferences.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Rick. I've been speaking with Rick Kallenberg, Director of the American Identity Project at the Progressive Policy Institute. I'm Ann Kim, Senior Editor at the Washington Monthly. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.